Hello, everybody, and welcome to our CESI Talks. CESI Talks is a series of online conversations with MEPs and EU experts in the frame of our WEP24 project. And today we have the pleasure to have with us Mr. Damian Boeselager. Mr. Boeselager is member of the European Parliament. And today we will discuss with him about the important topic of the digital transition in Europe. Mr. Boeselager, welcome.
Thanks for the invitation.
So first question, how can the European Union foster a digital transition which is inclusive and fair?
First of all, I think we need to transition. And for that, the principle needs to be that we are innovation friendly. So if we are not actually moving, if there is no digital transition, then it can't work. So we need to be innovation friendly. That would be my first principle. The second one would be that we safeguard the rights of people, and that we know already from the GDPR can be privacy rights, so the right to my own data. But there are many other questions of rights also when it comes to the B2B context, so in between companies. That's something I worked on in the Data Act extensively. So I would say the second principle should be that fair transition can only, and just transition can only work if we keep the rights at our forefront. That's also what makes the European digital transition different from maybe an American or a Chinese digital transition. So this needs to be the core. And then I think a third aspect is to look at how the digital transition will affect jobs and wages and these kind of things. And I mean, one thing that we can already see over the last years is that there's a concentration of wealth or revenue generation, if you want, when you have digital platforms that take over more and more. And having used ChatGPT myself, and understood the payment model, which is very much, token request based, and very much, I think it's important that we understand that we need decentralized taxation, and so basically user-based taxation for these kind of models to be able to ensure that not all the wealth is basically agglomerated somewhere completely outside the European Union or in just a couple of member states, but that revenues are, or like, let's say, interactions are taxed where they're taking place.
Thank you. And my second question would focus a bit more on young Europeans. I mean, we are both young, and the question is here, how can the EU facilitate the digital transition in a way that benefits young people? Because young people are the future.
Again, I think here of the three aspects that I looked at, which were basically, innovation friendliness, rights, and wealth agglomeration, I think the second one is concentration. I think the second one is the most important one, which is the rights-based one. So we can expand this, but the right to a healthy upbringing is something that I think matters a lot. We had just this week in the European Plenary a discussion about the right to disconnect, and also the question of whether doom scrolling should be somehow prohibited. I mean, at the moment, to make it very simple, social media is very much built as an addictive tool. I mean, the whole idea of social media is to maximize your time on their platforms, and especially if you're younger, but I think it's actually true also for all generations, that there might be questions of mental health, there might be questions of the public dialogue that is being produced by it. So I think, especially towards young people, we have a responsibility to ensure that these tools are safe to use and provide a mentally stable and healthy upbringing.
Thank you. And Mr. Boeselager, next year we have European elections. A very generic question, but I think that maybe you could answer it in like 2-3 sentences. Which would be for you the most important files of the European Parliament over the past 4 years?
I think this is obviously a bit subjective. I do believe that the Data Act that I've spent a lot of time negotiating and put a lot of energy and thoughts into is a super crucial law, and that people at the moment don't understand it yet, but that it will have an impact that is potentially equal to GDPR, even though it's for non-personal data. So while GDPR actually regulated the use of personal data, the rights of personal data attached to personal data, the industrial or non-personal data is now regulated via the Data Act that will come into force only in a couple of years. I mean, it's in force, but that will apply only in a couple of years. And I think that we will understand that this is completely reshaping who can monetize data that is produced by us. And I do believe that this is a very crucial law. And I think there are other laws which are also very important, but I think the Data Act is a bit undervalued in the sense of what kind of possibilities and what kind of innovation it can foster in the future.
Thank you. And my last question, this question was actually inspired by a quote from you I read recently, where you said, the EU just needs to function, then it doesn't need a narrative. You don't have to preach that it's important, you just have to make it important. So do you think that the EU is efficient? Is it functioning well? And maybe also related to this, why should Europeans go vote next year?
I mean, having read the news and following this very closely as one of the negotiators of the Ukraine facility, so the 50 billion euros for Ukraine for the next 4 years, I can tell you that we have a crucial issue in how the EU functions, because for core decisions, it's often still the 27 national leaders that have to come together to agree. And then you have a Russian puppet, Viktor Orban, actually blocking support for Ukraine, blocking potential formal accession talks with Ukraine. So I think what I'm trying to say is we have built a bit of a hybrid system between a parliamentary democracy on the one side and an intergovernmental system where you just, for all topics, would have national leaders come together. And we should just move to the governance system that we have on all levels, which is local, regional, and national, which is parliamentary democracy, at least in most EU countries. And then I think European elections would be self-explanatory, because the elections would actually define what kind of reality we live in, and because you would have a government that does either conservative, social democratic, liberal, Volt, green, whatever kind of politics for the next 4 or 5 years. And then it would, you wouldn't have to run around explaining to citizens that this is important, but they could actually feel it and influence it also for the future and say, I really didn't like this, so I'm going to vote these people out of power and I'm going to try to get something else. And so I think what I'm trying to say with the statement that you read, and I make that quite often, is we are trying to fluff something around and sell the European Union to the outside world. But the biggest marketing that any democracy can have, the biggest marketing moment, is an election. But if that election doesn't actually, change the government and define the government, then that's shitty. And that's why I'm arguing that we should, rather than constantly talking about how we can market better what we do, fix the core issue of the European democracy, which is that we have vetoes which can jeopardize the whole security of all of us, actually, because it's bought with Russian money indirectly by investments with Gazprom and so on. And get towards an actual parliamentary democracy, a bit more democracy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boeselager.
Thank you for the questions.